Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming by or watching this video after the fact. This is the second of 4 sessions. These are our micro learning sessions through Clermont County Public Library and Swayze. I'm really happy to be here again and to talk about not all kids' content is created equal. I am a media researcher who watches a lot of kids' content, and so I'm happy to dive into it with you to talk about what we see. What is the good stuff? What is the stuff that you can do without? And how to make sure your kids are learning from media. Just to quickly recap what we talked about in session 1, we mostly talked about why this feels so hard right now. This is because the tech world wants our attention 24/7. It doesn't have safety laws right now. The tech world makes more money, the more time, more pickups, or more ads that we view. And that is why there's an incentive to keep our eyeballs and our kids' eyeballs on screens longer. And that makes it hard to set limits. So if you're stressed out by this topic, well, welcome to the crowd. We talked about why excessive screen time can displace things that are important to early childhood development, like talking to them, reading to them, a good night's sleep, or playing outdoors. But today we're going to talk about the fact that some moderate use of better content, media content, is linked with better language and social emotional outcomes. So we'll get into the reason why. I always like to start my talks by reminiscing about what our media environments felt like when we were kids. On my last talk, I showed this slide from Common Sense Media showing all these tech gadgets from the 80s, the 90s, when all of us were growing up as parents. And now I'd love for you to reflect on what content did you grow up with? I put some things on this slide here that were my favorites. I watched a lot of Sesame Street, Ladybug's Picnic. I still sing that to my kids, or I did before they turned into teenagers. I watched a lot of Little Bear. I watched a lot of Thundercats. So, some of the stuff we watch is fun and educational. Some of it is just fun. So that's okay. Not everything needs to be perfectly educational, but we do want to make sure that content is created with kids' needs in mind, right? It should be appropriate to their development. It shouldn't be sassy, rude, or violent, and it shouldn't be using them to make money. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've learned in my research about why, what makes good content. What I hear from parents about the current digital environment is that it's harder to monitor what your kids are watching. This is because there's been an explosion of kids' content. If you look at the top YouTube channels, a lot of them are kids' content. They know parents are busy, kids are watching, and you can make a lot of money off of those ad impressions. There's also just tons of content uploaded to sites like YouTube every minute. So it's really hard to monitor that either through a computer algorithm or through a pair of watchful eyes from a parent when there's just always new stuff to discover. So we'll talk a little bit about the difference between content that's created for like a TV show or a broadcast station compared to content that's just uploaded to YouTube. Now, high quality content is really, really important. It is much more likely to be educational and benefit kids if it's been created with psychologists or educators or other professionals who really understand how children think. One important thing to know is that under 18 to 24 months, infants don't really learn from screens. And here's why. When you're an infant, you don't think symbolically yet. You don't understand that a cat that you see on the screen is the same thing as a cat you might see in your real life. That symbolism hasn't come online yet. Also, you don't really have the attention flexibility or the attention capacity to really remember what you saw on a screen and then transfer it to your everyday life. So even if your infant, your 9-month-old, your 12-month-old looks like they're staring at a screen and that they're really focused on it, they're really just watching the lights and the sounds and the movements. They aren't necessarily absorbing what they're seeing and then being able to, we define learning as I saw it on a screen and then later in the day, I can apply that knowledge. So It's possible that infants, they might see some hand movements on a screen, and if you do those hand movements too, they can copy you, but they're not going to really retain or remember things. However, once you get to age 2 and then 3 and above, you really can start learning from screens. It's different than learning from your real world interactions. We still want kids to play, laugh, dance, make things up. But when you are watching well-crafted media, this includes Sesame Street, Blue's Clues, Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. There's been research showing that these shows can have a positive impact on learning and behavior. For example, Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, when kids watch those shows and parents sing along and do those songs, those kids have been shown to have a better social and emotional skills. So pretty cool. You're watching a cartoon, but you also get to learn a few ways to handle emotions. Um, Sesame Street has been found to help kids with learning their letters and their numbers and how to be kind and share. Now, what's different about these shows? They, like I said, hire psychologists, they test whether children learn from their products, and basically they're prioritizing child well-being when they are designing a product. So you kind of trust that a nonprofit like PBS Kids isn't just trying to make money off your kids' eyeballs, because that's not the way their business works, but they're really there to try to have a positive effect and then to let your kid go and play and do other things. So that is why the American Academy of Pediatrics and our Center of Excellence on Social Media and Youth Mental Health, we recommend nonprofits like PBS Kids and Sesame Street because they have been shown to be educational and they are not trying to keep your kids on for hours and hours. So one major change that's happened over the past couple of years, though, is kids love YouTube. YouTube is free, so a lot of families say they're using it instead of paying for streaming services. And the research from the Pew Internet, this is a large survey that's done, and I helped with this particular survey that just came out this fall. They surveyed parents of kids 12 and younger and asked them about their screen time. And they found with YouTube in particular, lots of kids are watching it daily. So under 2, about 35% are watching it daily. And from age 2 to 4, 51% are watching it daily. And you can see that 84% have ever watched it. This is the same thing we see in my studies at Michigan, that a lot of toddlers have YouTube as one of their regular go-to places where they're consuming media. So what's the issue here? Lots of us have watched YouTube and you can find some really cool stuff on it and you can find some junk on it too. So some things we found in our research is that kids who are YouTube viewers have overall higher screen time than non-YouTube viewers. So maybe it keeps kids on longer. And we have found that the content is pretty variable. So you can find good stuff and there's also a lot of junk on there. There's also lots of ads. So those are the things as a parent, if your kid is watching YouTube, you've got to know how to navigate these parts of the platform. My research lab watches a lot of YouTube to evaluate how high quality it is. How do we do that? We watch videos, we count how many ads are showing up when those videos show up. And then we code things, meaning we kind of record how often this is happening. One thing we record that's very unique to YouTube, we call bedazzling. It really just means there's extra bells and whistles. There's little light effects like you could see on this screen. There's this puzzle here, and the content creator has added these little green sparkles that show up. And so they have all these little animations that just go on top of the video. And we think that this grabs little kids' attention because it's just extra novelty. And little kids, their attention goes to whatever is shiny and interesting. Here's some other examples of bedazzling is just having little floating like buttons that show up on the screen. We see a lot of what's called vicarious pleasure or wish fulfillment. This is the sort of content where you watch other kids playing with toys. You watch a cartoon character having a birthday party with all of these balloons. You watch someone unboxing a bunch of toys like here, or you watch a child eating chocolate. This kid's eating a big chocolate shark. You watch a YouTuber trying on princess dresses. So this type of wish fulfillment content is very common. In a recent sample that we've analyzed of toddlers YouTube viewing, 49% of the videos had some sort of vicarious pleasure. So this is very common that YouTubers will put high pleasure content on YouTube because they know it gets clicks. And remember, the more clicks, the more money they can make through ad dollars. So that is why it shows up so much on YouTube. We also sometimes see 16% of the videos we've seen have included commercial content. So this is toys that have a brand name, unboxing these trolls or something else that shows a brand. Okay, so those are the more negative sides of the YouTube content that we see. We also look for positive role modeling. How often do the characters in these YouTube videos show a behavior that you would want your child to show? And we have found that 48% of videos have some sort of positive role modeling. This is usually videos like this one from Bluey, where they're all strapped into their car seats and they're not complaining about it. We also see some negative role modeling. Here's an example from this cartoon called Crybabies, where they tease each other and sneak and kind of are not nice to each other. Negative role modeling only is showing up in 20% of videos, thankfully, but still, that's like 1 in 5. Then we look for how educational the content. A really deep and rich educational content like these 3 I show here. This is like the emotions from the Storybots, number blocks from the BBC and Sesame Street. These teach a concept and then they teach it in new ways. They show kids how it's meaningful. They might repeat it a couple times in new ways. They might show you how to use that skill or that knowledge in your real life. So that is called deep learning. The shallow learning is like a YouTuber just saying, oh, this is a green ball, and then moving on to the next thing, where they just, show you one very brief educational concept, but they don't actually use known ways to actually teach the concept. One thing you gotta be aware of if your kid watches YouTube, especially on the main YouTube platform, is there's been a lot more shorts. YouTube shorts are the short vertical videos that you can just swipe, swipe, swipe. A lot more of those have been made for kids since the spring. And then now there's also AI generated videos. Here's a couple of them. They're all a bit weird. This one has a baby Uriel who's about to be covered in ice cream with a pregnant Uriel mom right next to it. There's a horse who just cracked out of an egg who has an extra set of arms. There's a deer doing something on a tightrope. So these are the types of bizarre, eye-capturing AI videos that we've seen on YouTube. And my general recommendation is for families, if you see this stuff come up for your kids, is just to avoid it. If they watch YouTube Kids, you can actually block these channels so that they don't show up in the recommendations feed. Why don't we want little kids watching shorts? Kids need to stretch their attention span. You want them to be able to focus on something and follow a story over time. That's how things make sense to them, is that they watch their favorite characters go through something like Daniel Tiger dealing with the disappointment of his tiger cake falling and how does he cope with it. You can't learn that in just a little snippet. Little snippets grab our attention, but they don't help teach a larger story. And so that's why, even though we haven't seen any studies on YouTube Shorts and kids' attention spans, we really just recommend that that's not an age-appropriate way to use media if you're 5 and under. Okay, I want to give just a couple minutes to our research on mobile apps. So if your kid has an iPad or you let them use a family iPad or phone, should they download apps and play them? Well, there's hundreds and thousands of apps for children on app stores. We've done some research showing that most apps that call themselves educational are not actually educational. A lot of them are low quality because they have lots of ads. They tell kids to make purchases. They have weak learning goals or they have repetitive design. I'm going to show you some examples of this so you as a parent can judge apps for yourself. Here's a few that we rated as lower quality, and you'll see that they're mostly because this one that's the baby phone has lots of ads. You can see the ads pop up on the top and on the bottom. These ads are not age appropriate. One is for college, one is for violent video games. and it just shakes and makes noise and tries to grab attention, but it's not really teaching anything. It's very repetitive. On the other one, this is one where you can make baby food and feed a baby, but you can only do it one way. You always have to add the same ingredients, you always have to mix it the same way, and you always need to feed the baby the same way. And then cha-ching, you get coins every time you feed the baby. So it's very repetitive. We call this closed loop design because it just has the kid doing the same satisfying thing over and over. What are some other options for designs that would be more open-ended? Well, here's a couple. Lego Duplo, this app allows kids to build with Duplos any way they want. You can build any sort of house, any sort of, different vehicle or creation, and it's not telling you what to do or making you keep within certain lines. This is an app that's probably more for kindergartners, but it's called Lightbot. It's an early coding app, and it teaches kids problem solving of how to help this little bot get around that board through coding. So we thought these were more examples of more open-ended problem solving, where the kid really needs to think before they start playing or instructing the bot what to do. These apps like Daniel Tiger Learns How to Go Potty or Toka Kitchen, these earned higher points also. The potty one is very slow paced. You can just take one step at a time while you learn all these steps of how to use the potty. You see how Daniel Tiger deals with it, so there's nice character development, but you also, it's very meaningful to a child's life. You really want to have a learning goal that they can then apply in their everyday life. One reason that the Toka Kitchen scored high is because it's not fast-paced. It's what we call user-paced. So user-paced means the child decides what happens when and where things go. You don't have this design where it's like, do this, do this, do this, do this. It can be calm and slow-paced. It also allows two people to play at the same time. So you can have multi-touch inputs. That means a parent can, grab one thing and a kid can grab another thing. So people can interact socially around this app. So those are just two examples of ways that you would want to look for apps that don't just have this closed loop design with lots of ads. You'd want to look for something a little bit more meaningful, a little bit more calm, where your child gets to make some decisions and create things. This raises a good question about pacing, right? One positive thing about both of these apps that I mentioned is because it lets the child decide some of the pace. And so I often hear parents right now worried about fast-paced videos and what effect that has on a child's attention span or their cognitive control. We also call that executive functioning. There is research that after watching a very fast-paced and fantastical show, young children have weaker cognitive control compared to if they just drew with crayons. There's a classic study that came out in 2011 where they had preschoolers watch 9 minutes of SpongeBob SquarePants, 9 minutes of Caillou, which is a very calm, slow-paced, very realistic show, and then 9 minutes of coloring. Then they had kids do this task called the Tower of Hanoi task, where they have to go from this initial stacking to this goal stacking. And within the fewest amount of turns, you have to get these different bars stacked on these pegs. It's hard. You have to plan it out and figure out the right moves. So the kids who had just watched a very fast-paced, fantastical show, their brains just were a little bit more burned out, I guess. They were not able to use as much cognitive control to solve this puzzle. You may see this at home. If you have a child who watches something really exciting, really fast-paced, immediately after, I sometimes hear from parents that their kids just seem more dysregulated, more out of it. But I know with my own kids, when I would make them watch Mr. Rogers, afterwards they'd be like, oh, hi, hey, do you want to go color? Like they just had this calmer sense to them. So do that own experiment with your own kids. See what sort of shows rile them up and see what sort of shows help them be a little bit more calm and positive. There was a great experiment done um, about 10 years ago that showed that if you take preschoolers and you reduce their violent content and you increase their pro-social content, so this was like you reduce violent cartoons and you increase more pro-social, Daniel Tiger sort of cartoons, just after a couple of weeks, even though screen time didn't change, the kids who were able to watch more pro-social content had better behavior and better social skills. So that's pretty powerful evidence that just changing content really can help kids' development and behavior. So this is one thing I tell parents. If you're feeling overwhelmed with screen time, step one can just be shifting content. Stop using any content that's more sassy, rude, fast-paced, and go to something, maybe something you watched as a kid. Lots of parents say Little Bear is like that nice, chill sort of tempo that they like, the pace of that, and that it seems to have a better effect on their child's behavior. So to sum up, I just want to review this handout that we created for our early childhood screen time toolkit through the American Academy of Pediatrics. So you can find this on aap.org/early childhood screen time. And this gives parents an idea of what's the content to avoid, what's the content that's fine for an occasional treat, but shouldn't be like your daily content that you're watching, and what is the good stuff. So I'll zoom in a little bit here. The good stuff we named, like I said, Sesame Street, PBS Kids, streaming platforms where they've really taken some care to have positive content like Blue's Clues, Tumbleleaf, Bluey, Miss Rachel. I also just watched Frog and Toad with my uh, my son, and we thought it was so calm and hilarious. So, there are a couple nice shows that we didn't name here. Always great to use FaceTime with friends and family or to play music or songs that let you sing and dance along. If you're not sure whether something is good and worth your kids' attention, you can always look on Common Sense Media, which is commonsensemedia.org, and they do ratings and reviews for all sorts of things like apps, movies, books. Okay, the occasional stuff is more the fast-paced shows with lots of bells and whistles that might grab kids' attention, like the ones I showed, but not be really highly educational. Stuff that's more product focused, like toys, kid influencers, especially if kids are showing off and like just using an unrealistic amount of wealth or toys or excessive stuff. Kids tell us that makes them feel bad about themselves. So you could avoid those. Kids under 5 are also not really ready for a gaming console or virtual reality. So it's best to kind of keep those limited if you have older siblings who are using those. And then the things to avoid is scariness, violence, aggressive or destructive behavior, AI-generated content or AI chatbots, and stuff that's too short form or too mature. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to mention is if you're shopping for your little kid in the holiday season, what are some rules of thumb that you can follow that would be kind of the most age-appropriate toys? All right, we're going to start where we left off, which is the red zone. What to avoid. I signed on to an advisory last week warning families not to get AI toys this holiday season. This is because we're not sure how well these have been safety tested. This is a large language model that's AI talking to your kid. We don't know where the data is going. We really need more research to make sure these are safe. Also, little kids' brains are so magical. They're going to think these toys are alive because they seem so human-like. So it's much better to work on just getting them stuffed animals that they can just pretend are alive. And like I said before, kids under 5 are not really ready for virtual reality or gaming consoles. Now, what's in the kind of how to be choosy and just to be careful about. So if you want to get your kid a tablet, kids under 5 don't need tablets for, educational reasons. But if you want to get one because you want to have something mobile or you want to have it in the car or for travel, just make sure that the tablet has some parental controls so you can set time limits, you can set content limits. And if you want to get some tech toys, just know that when they have lots of bells and whistles, kids don't play as deeply because they just have the toy do everything for them. So it's fun to get a tech toy every once in a while, But just know kids do the most with their brains when they have open-ended toys. These are toys where your kid's brain gets to take the lead and gets to build things, gets to imagine things, or old school nostalgia toys. This might be board games or something else that you played as a kid that you'll be motivated to play together. I also often get asked, what about audio players, like those little boxes where you put a card in or you put a little figurine on top? Audio is great for little kids because then they get to practice listening to a story, and you can listen along with them. So just to sum up, um, when kids are little, they learn best from offline activities where they use their hands and their bodies, but above two, they can also learn from screens. And parents should really, the takeaway I want is them to take away from tonight is not, oh, I feel guilty when my kid watches, a little bit of toys or something that's a little bit fluff. No, it's more that your kid's mind is amazing. So they deserve media that's been crafted in a way that really respects their time and attention, isn't trying to them to watch longer and longer and longer, not full of ads, leaves space for imagination and social interaction, is slower paced, and really is created thoughtfully. So it has a great characters and a great story. That is how kids learn best. And a quick rule of thumb, if you're trying to make a decision, is just using nonprofits because they are not trying to keep your kid on longer. Okay, I'm happy to take some questions now. Thank you for listening.